Okay, welcome to meeting number 3. We made some really great progress at our last meeting. Juliana, we saved a seat for you right up here. We made some really great progress at our last meeting. We looked back at, as you remember, we did the surveys of all the metro departments and offices, or a collection of them, and we looked back together through some of the responses. In your packet in front of you, there is just the questions that we asked of those folks also here, because we'll be looking at that a little bit today also. And then we made some really great progress on coming up with the components of the policy about reporting to the mayor's office when our departments or our offices get a request from federal immigration authorities. So that's what we'll be spending actually quite a bit of time on today, just making sure we're aligned on that. Because I am ever cognizant of the fact that we have a December 13th deadline to turn in a report to the mayor about the work of this task force. And so, speaking of the report, I wanted to run by y'all a process for getting it drafted and just make sure that it works for you. So we're at meeting 3. At meeting 4, I'm really hoping by then we've got a draft report, because that's like, to be clear, 4 days before the deadline. So I think if we start the editing process at that meeting, it's too late, right? So my goal is to spend a little bit of time between now and, say, the Friday before the final meeting, or ideally a little bit before that, working on a draft that encapsulates our work, circulate it to y'all over email, get some edits back from you, if any, just that way, so that by the time we get to our 4th meeting, you've already seen some of the revisions that you wanted to be made. And then we can use that final meeting, part of it, to discuss any final revisions or anything that needs to be added. And that's also the piece where we'll be inviting the public in. So we want to make sure that we leave some time for public comment. But anyway, that's the process I propose. I take this stuff now, turn it into a short and concise report about our work, and get you all a draft to look at in a week or so. Does that work for everybody? Awesome. Okay, so today we're gonna, like I said, dive back into those components of the policy about reporting. We also got in some new answers from some remaining metro departments about their reporting and compliance policies, the answers to those questions that we had asked. And then this poor piece of our meeting, it always gets pushed, but I'm really hoping that today we do get to take a few minutes at the end to look at some sample policies. So that is the goal. And let's just get to it. Hello and welcome. Let's get you. You want to come? Oh, you've got a packet right there. That's perfect. 100% attendance 2 days before Thanksgiving.
We're just so glad it's not tomorrow morning, as
Also
it was
that.
originally planned.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so we now have the answers from every department except for NES, Audra, to those questions that you see in your packet, which essentially is, do you collect information related to immigration? Has anybody asked you for it? If yes, continue, and then it's sort of what's your reporting and what's your compliance. How do you report to the mayor's office, and then how do you decide internally whether you comply?
Do we know why NES didn't turn something in?
Mary, do you know? No. And so that's one of those things I think we just noted in our final report. We asked 12 and we got 11. But it's a good question. So I took a look through them, and we can sort of walk through them here. Here's the top line. I mean, with just most departments, as we predicted, they don't have policies about this. They haven't been asked, and they don't have a policy. And so I think, again, it just sort of underscores the need to have some model language for folks. And even, I think, in asking these departments these questions, maybe we've kicked off some internal conversations about, this task force is asking for a policy. Do we have one? Should we have one? So you, I think now, are the new ones in here, Audra? So let me pass, can you remind me which ones are in that?
The sheriff and the 2 courts, and then a summary, the first 2 pages are a summary of all the responses that regarding compliance specifically.
So what I would like to do is just take a minute and have you guys look through those ones. And really goal is just to understand what's in there and what's not. I do want to draw your attention to the ones from the trial court and the general sessions court, because they are folks who have received those sorts of requests. So let me just flag those for you. And just as a reminder, so our goal right now is for the report simply to describe what we're seeing. And so the way that I would plan to describe it in the report is just, these are the questions we asked. Most folks don't get asked for this sorts of information / don't have a policy related to it. But I want to make sure before I do that, and having just given you 45 seconds or probably less to actually review this, come back to me too. But if you think there's something that needs to be added to that, I would be really interested in hearing about it so I can make sure it makes it into the final report. And Audrey, do you want to just project the, yeah, that's perfect, and that can guide our conversation a bit. So unless you all want more time to look through it now, why don't we say for the purposes of this that that's how I'll plan to describe this stuff. But again, as you go through this later, and remember that we handed out last time all the other responses, so you should now have all of them. So I guess that would be 11 different sets. But if you see something else that you think really needs to be highlighted, let me know. And with that, I would love to move on to continuing our conversation from last time about the key components of the reporting policy, because I think we made lots of progress around that last time, and I want to make sure that I'm really capturing what was actually said and what needs to be included in these components. So in your packet, you have something that looks like this. Says recommended components of future reporting policy. Some of them I think we have alignment on right out the gate, and some of them I think we'll probably have some more discussion on. So let's get to it. So the first part is to whom this applies, which departments and offices. And what I heard from y'all is based on what Cindy said at the first meeting where we went through that PowerPoint of who the mayor's office has authority over and which departments would be more of a suggestion, that we want this to apply to everybody the mayor's office has authority over, and then be a recommendation for the other ones. And so I think, Cindy, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. Did I do that? And here, let me give you, I don't think you have any of this stuff. So Cindy and Bob, did I do that right, is the first question. Do you guys need the handouts? Is that, yeah, hold on one second. So are these ones the actual ones to whom the policy should apply? I just took it out of your PowerPoint. And the only question would be, the one it didn't that I had the question about was the department that had an independent board. So here's the agenda, here's the questions we asked, and here's the draft. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, we'll double check, and then
Okay,
you're
cool.
correct that departments that have boards that govern them would be under a separate.
A separate one, okay. So I think that's important because some of the departments that we asked these survey questions to, they're not the same, right, as the departments over which the mayor's office has authority. So I think that's just an important thing for us all to understand. If we learn nothing else in this, we now all have an understanding of which departments are of the mayor's office and have directly that line of authority and which are outside of that. So that's the first one, to whom. Now here's where a lot of the meat of the conversation comes in. The next one that we really talked about was, what is the action that triggers the reporting. And remember, again, and this is the thing I'm saying till I'm blue in the face, the only piece that we're doing policy recommendations about are that reporting. Something happens at your department, and you gotta call somebody in the mayor's office, and what does that look like? So I think it was really helpful yesterday, or last time was Bob's first meeting, and I think you added such value, Bob, because right away you came in with this sort of dichotomy of the way that we can think about the different actions that trigger reporting, right? And so so I'm gonna run through them, and then I wanna dive into them and see if there's anything else to add. And I also really like to think of examples, sort of illustrative examples of the sort of thing that we're talking about, so we can make sure that if we do this, that folks in the Metro Department sort of understand what sorts of requests we're talking about. So first question is there anything to add? And second is, can we find examples for each of these? So requests from federal immigration authorities for ongoing or routine communication or cooperation. The next one is request from federal immigration authorities to modify the ongoing or routine communication and cooperation. And then the third one is things outside of that, requests that do not qualify as ongoing or routine. So the first question again is, are those the right categories? And then, what do we need to add? And can we think of examples? So that is my question to you.
So I think the third one here can be, I think when we spoke about the third one last time, we were talking about the sort of emergencies. But I think that there is another thing that could either be a fourth bullet or fall under that, which is something that is in the routine course of business, but not a routine request. And let me actually step back, that I think part of my hope would be that it's not just requests, but communication either way. So to take, for example, the probation department. If the probation officer affirmatively on their own reached out to ICE and said, hey, I have a probationer who doesn't have a social security number, do you want more information? So I would encourage us to cover contact, or communication, not just requests, so that it doesn't matter whether it is initiated by immigration or whether it is initiated by the Metro employee. And then with that comes, as I said, the sort of fourth bullet of communications that are done in the routine course of business, but that are not in and of themselves routine. So, for example, communication between one of Darren's staff about a detainer would be routine. There's a policy basically set up, or there's a practice, they do it all the time, it's a routine communication. A police officer deciding to call ICE in a traffic stop, the course of business is still routine, it's not an emergency, but the communication is not routine or is not part of a sort of established practice. Does that make sense, that fourth category that I see?
What do y'all think?
Do you think we could modify the third point to include that?
I think it would be a little clearer if the third and a fourth were separate, just because I think emergency and, I think there's the emergency versus non-emergency way. I mean, I think whatever makes more sense to people. In my mind, they seem more separate, but I'm not wedded to that.
But I'll again say what one person's emergency is another person's routine, so.
True.
Yeah.
True.
And maybe it helps if we do define with examples, sort of this is what we mean by this. So what I'm hearing, and I see some heads nodding, is add a fourth category that looks like routine ordinary course of business, not an emergency.
Right.
But the ask itself is something like a police officer than a member of the sheriff's office.
It's just unusual, is out of the common course of practice. There's a wonderfly
Is that like a
imprecise
term
term
of art?
for it.
Yeah, I'm gonna write that, it sounds very technical. And so maybe the practice there is something like a police officer at a traffic stop, but weigh in here, Deputy Chief Hager, too. That would be out of the course of business. That doesn't typically happen. It's not part of the practice. It'd be way, you might define it as an
What's
emergency.
more routine for us is when a foreign national is, for example, killed in a car crash, we're required to notify the consulate.
Oh, that's something.
Yeah, so, is that something the mayor wants to know about?
Sorry, what did you
When a foreign national's killed in, say, a traffic stop or something, we try to make notifications, and there's a consular notification process.
I would think that would be best for Mayor to know about it if anyone's killed.
But is that what you're getting at? 'Cause what he
That is
was,
not so much what I'm getting at.
Her example is way outside the norm, so.
Yes,
Yeah.
right, that's what I'm saying, it's not something that, but a traffic stop isn't. So like, let's say police and ICE both showing up at a place to arrest somebody. That to me is the sort of emergency, public relations.
yeah,
Duh,
Twitter,
you know, whereas some random, or let's take it out of police, some random probation officer suddenly decides he really doesn't like this one probationer and calls ICE about him. Again, the sort of method of interaction is very routine, but the act of communicating with ICE is not consistent with sort of accepted practice.
So what I'm hearing is that the way that I read these three is something coming from the federal government to us locally. What she's trying to get is that, what about when the communication is from us to them, but it's not during routine? So if we amend 3 to say requests from or communications with federal immigration authorities that do not qualify as ongoing or routine, would that serve that purpose? Because we want to make sure we're capturing when we initiate the contacts outside of our normal practice. So if you're saying communications with them from our end, not necessarily requests from them, would that satisfy that?
Should it be an amendment on
On
3
3.
or just a completely different?
yeah, we're not limited to
point?
3, like, we could have more.
I think the question is just, do we want a separate bullet about emergencies? Because
Which
do
is
we
what
want like
3 is.
emergencies to have different, say, time limits on when they should be reported? So I think that to me is the biggest issue.
And that's
Do we
gonna
want
become super
emergencies
relevant, actually, in the
separated
next
out?
section, we'll talk about
Otherwise, I would say
timeline.
yes.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
typically it's the anomaly that leads to the confusion.
Yeah.
That random event that doesn't happen often, that leads to the confusion that brought us here in the first place.
So how would you articulate an emergency situation that is separate from something that's not ongoing or established?
I mean, I think I think there's, for me, 2 ways to look at it. One is, I think the emergency situations do usually tend to be ICE contacting or sort of co-opting Metro resources versus the other way. And B, when it's a public relations issue, like an then how do you identify that is the other question. But I think about the incidents this summer that we would be, you know, the sort of historical emergencies we're talking about, although as Anna said, my emergency is your routine or whatever.
So although is this a category of communication or is this more a category
temporary.
of reporting?
Yeah,
And
'cause
maybe-
right now we've defined it in the negative, right? It's not ongoing
Right.
or routine.
Right.
But Bob, I think it's sort of both. Because how do you know how to report if it's not first categorized in the triggering piece? You have too many lawyers at this end of the
I
table.
think you're right. How do you define emergency? I mean, what would you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And who was it? Last week, somebody was saying the emergency issue is the public relations. The deputy chief or Darren, somebody, or.
And I think it probably is, but, you know, and typically before that department head can make a report within these suggested timelines, Twitter and everybody else is.
So maybe an emergency is something which we all find out from some sort of media. Right? And a non-emergency is something that comes up through through departments.
Okay, I think this looks great, Bob. I also think that you can explain it best, so I'm gonna hand this back to you. Bob has done some drafting, which I think makes a lot of sense, but can you walk us
Yeah,
through
but
what you
it
just did?
doesn't deal with with your emergency question, which is, I think, still to be dealt with. But to your point, which is a good one, it's not so much federal action triggering the reporting policy, it's action by the feds or by Metro triggering the reporting policy. So instead of each of these bullets leading off request from, you know, have them start communications with federal immigration authorities related to, first one, ongoing or established interactions, And that way, I think established perhaps gets at what you're trying to draw a distinction, where someone decides to go solo. And then second bullet point, communications with federal immigration authorities related to modifications of ongoing or established practice interactions. And then the third one, communications with federal immigration authorities that do not relate to ongoing or established interactions. Now, in terms of the emergency,
I would just say, do not relate to ongoing or routine interactions between Metro and immigration.
And I think that third one captures what Mary Catherine's trying to do, because to us, that call for service is that. It's not really an emergency, but it's something that is
Right.
kind of,
So I guess the issue then is, do we want a fourth bullet to
Right.
be emergencies? But I do think we just need to clarify at the end of that, it's not, what's not routine is the ICE Metro communication. The Metro itself action, the stop, the probation check-in, whatever, is routine.
So we switched it to communications from requests from, which solves the up and down problem. But now the question, we've got two questions still. One is, do we need a fourth bullet that talks about sort of the independent operator, Metro employee, right? Or do we solve that?
I think it's what the committee said.
We solved
I
it.
think it would fall under the communications with.
Right, I think it is almost in
The
some
third one?
ways
Yeah.
better described by three.
I think Bob's
Okay.
language fixes that.
Right.
Great. But now the question is, what is an emergency?
I don't think it matters.
It's just
Under the
anything
definition
that's
of
not
third-
routine?
Well,
Yeah.
for us, emergencies are routine.
True.
You know, so what are you
That's
trying
true.
to capture that's not, falls within that communications regarding?
So I guess the way that has become an issue for this group is the timeliness of reporting. But I think what we're all concerned about with the timeliness of reporting is the things that have already hit the media, right?
Which we can't control.
Right. So maybe that is outside the scope of,
This section at least. Yeah.
I mean, is it fair to say that something in the third category, communications that do not relate to ongoing or established interactions, should be reported immediately?
Maybe if we can think of some examples that can help us
Immediately
decide.
could mean 3 a.m, so.
Coming your way, guys,
And,
3 o'clock.
That's right. I'm sure the mayor's office will have someone on standby to
That's
take that
right.
call.
I think that does beg the question that we're gonna have to get to the timelines.
Yeah.
I think it'll help us to come up with some examples, so when we're thinking about timelines, we're thinking about what's realistic and like who actually, how often do you wanna get the 3 o'clock in the morning phone calls, when are those necessary? So let's think of some examples, starting with the first one. So now it's communications with federal immigration authorities for ongoing or established interactions. Bob, help me out.
Communications with federal immigration authorities related to ongoing or established interactions.
I would say interactions or information exchange? Or interactions cover that, you think?
I think interactions would cover that.
All right,
And
so
that'll also come out in the examples. Yeah.
does this look like detainer warrants? Does this look like something else? What is an ongoing or established interaction
With eyes.
with ICE?
I mean, ours would truly be ongoing and established.
Sure. So that's the easy one. What else? What other, as a police
We
department?
don't have one, so
Okay.
it's,
I think it's mostly you guys. And with you guys, I guess it would be detainers and then actually transfers? Do you think those are separate or the
I mean,
same?
yeah, there's communication about that process, you know,
Right.
obviously, but, and I would probably just tie it to that detainer, because you got, you know, but it's established, routine, it fits all of those, I guess the first one of the three, where it's, right?
Right, yeah.
Every time, I mean, and I think the next one addresses our other concern, which would be if we were asked to change that via immigration, right? We want to change our practice, then obviously that would trigger a notification, but,
I guess I would just think that it could, especially if this is something that's being made public in order to increase transparency, is for anything that falls under category one, there be some place, so, you know, if Darren's office says, you know, 5 detainers in this period or whatever, there be some place where people can look at to get more information about what that routine interaction entails, so that he's not having to report the entirety of sort of what that entails each time, but there is some place for people to find that information.
And I think when we.
For the public, or? I'm seeing all of this as eventually being for the public, but.
And that's a really important question, and I think it's one that we've got to answer possibly with the timeline piece. Last time we sort of were talking about, like, conveying to the mayor's office is the same as making public, and I don't know that that's actually what we, maybe it is, right? But is it the same thing? Do we want it to be the same thing? Do we want every conveyance to be public? So let's get there, but first let's do this.
Here's another example.
Oh, okay, so this is the trial court
Use this
one.
thing.
So this is, Bob's highlighting the trial court's answer to our survey questions. Have you ever received requests from federal immigration authorities? Yes. Agents from ICE have previously asked probation officers for general information. Do you have a policy or practice in place? Yes. Probation officers are instructed to immediately notify the trial court administrator of requests for immigration-related information. So would that
And
be,
then,
are you putting that in category 1, Bob?
I think that would not,
Or is that a 3?
well, state trial court employees have been instructed to only provide the person's full name, OCA number, and date of birth to request from federal immigration authorities. So there is an exchange of information.
And so that's, is that a routine
I think that-
exchange?
I think so.
I would think that would be because there's a practice and a policy governing what happens.
Okay, and so our first example for 1 is, Sheriff, excuse the ignorance, is it called a detainer warrant? Like, what's the actual word?
I've used both words, that's probably
Detainer
good.
warrant.
It's now combined, so.
Okay.
better.
So the first one is detainer warrant, but the second one is this piece,
Yeah,
which is requests from federal authorities, requests to probation officers?
probation officers.
But you're gonna
yes.
have to make it clear that it's trial court versus general sessions probation.
Requests to
was that
trial,
Already
general
general-
sessions?
No, that was trial court.
That was trial court, yeah.
Because I think they stopped it.
okay.
Well, and I think I would even limit that a little further, so the request and provision of just the limited information. But that any provision of anything beyond that limited information would fall into number 3.
Well, except that it also says that warrants signed by federal judges or magistrates may require them to provide immigration-related information not otherwise provided. So it could be broader than that previous request if they have a court order.
I would bet they never ever do.
You know,
Oh, I know,
They put it
I know.
there.
So requests to trial court probation officers for limited information? Is that the right way to capture that as an example?
Sure.
And then 2 is modifications to detainer warrants. Or I mean, I guess
To
then by
the-
definition would be modifications to the process.
To the
used
process,
in the-
right.
So let's dive in, as long as that makes sense to y'all for 1 and 2, let's dive into 3 for a second, because I think that's a little bit stickier.
So I would say 2 would also, though, for example, be ICE reaching out to probation saying, hey, instead of just those 3 pieces of information, can you start always sending us a 4th? Or can you send us a monthly list?
Do you think us or the DA's office, for example, completing a U visa process would fall under communications? Because that
I-
might get into some open criminal case.
I don't think it does, because that is actually not communications with immigration.
Okay,
That is communications with the
DHA.
individual and potentially that individual's attorney.
Okay,
And because they're the ones who get the certification.
okay.
So thinking about that third category, give us an example of something that it's not, we can't define emergency, so we're defining it in the negative as it's anything that's not routine, right? So let's use some examples of those sorts of things. This becomes important because it's gonna have a much quicker triggering, much quicker timeline than something different.
So I think the emergency examples are ICE calls ECC and asks for police backup. Or 2 maybe ICE agents show up at a school asking for information, or a hospital, or any place. those are what we've seen.
Perhaps since this specific reporting policy would apply just to metro departments, it might not make sense to use a school
Schools.
example.
Correct, good point. Or show up at a park.
Although, let me just, Hank, I'm gonna say that this doesn't actually apply, the mayor, it cannot necessarily apply to the sheriff's office either.
Right. I think with these, I think the examples should include both, where possible. I mean, and it can be that it, applies where it applies and is a recommendation where it's a recommendation.
These are more, it's tricky though, right? I mean, they're more illustrative so that people understand the sorts of things that would trigger, but just because we're writing your department as an example in here does not modify the fact that, it doesn't modify what the Metro Charter and laws say either. So if we were to do
We're not
that,
that
I think we have to be, unfortunately, me typing it into a document does not have that effect. But I think if we do use examples like that, which we might have to, because they're the times that it comes up most, as the sheriff said with the detainer warrants, I do think we have to be really clear that us writing this doesn't
Right.
mean that you actually have to do it in this instance if the mayor's office doesn't have the power to compel you to do so. But, so Hank, I hear what you're saying, and I think it's important. Okay, so do we all have a decent understanding of sort of the three categories and how they would come up?
Do we need to talk more about the number 3 that is not emergency? We've talked about emergency examples, we haven't talked about non-emergency examples.
Yes. Yes, the two emergencies are ICE calls the emergency command center and asks for police backup. Does that feel right to you, Deputy Chief?
It would be communications.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. They call, can I just say ICE
ICE calls.
asks for MNPD backup?
Yeah, that's
And
fine.
just get the. And then, ICE asks for information on MNPS students.
I also like your example here about parks, because I think that's a
Yeah.
good thing that is a department. And that we have heard about things like that.
Oh, except for Parks' response was like, no. So Parks might be like, what?
Right.
This has not happened.
Well, but these again are
Right, future looking.
Yes,
Right,
yes,
these
yes,
aren't
yes,
just-
yes, absolutely. Yep. All right, so let's think about those non-emergency but outside the routine course of business examples for 3. What does that look like? It sort of looks like you've got a, independently operating Metro employee someplace. Help me understand how that would come into play.
I think that could, it could come into a play in a lot of different scenarios. I think pretty much almost any Metro employee who has contact with the public could take it upon themselves to reach out to immigration. A school resource officer, a teacher, a police officer, a sheriff's officer, I guess isn't a is Metro, but I think anybody could reach out, either requesting information or offering information.
And so maybe we can just keep it that broad, like a Metro employee sort of, outside the job description asks, like,
I think that makes me nervous just
Or not
because I think that can get really, if you're a probation officer, I think there are ways to justify it sometimes as being within your job description. But outside of normal practice, maybe.
Tori, what do you think?
I'm just trying to figure out what communication would possibly fall outside of this. It seems to me we're covering the whole waterfront. Why don't we just say, anytime, it seems to me that the departments are going to need to figure out how they're gonna handle this and have their own internal policies. And as I said last time, I think you've got the two aspects. One is the points 1 and 2, which is the policy, the ongoing or routine communication, and that's something that Darren, I would assume, would be sort of a monthly, this is how many contacts we had. I would assume that if another department was approached and asked, they would sort of run it up to make sure the mayor's included and talk about it and so on and so forth. I don't know that that's really that's not so much the big issue. So the other issue is number 3 that we're trying to get our arms around.
Yeah.
It just seems to me, as we're sitting here trying to figure out what's emergency and what's non-emergency and all that kind of stuff, is, as I said the last time, I think it's gonna be your PIOs in the various groups that are gonna know when this is something that's a media issue and when it's of no consequence.
Well, I think these are just supposed to be examples, am I wrong?
You're
Just
definitely
as
just
a
supposed to-
guide.
this is supposed to be a guide,
It doesn't stop them
even-
from creating their own internal.
No, and it doesn't, but I'm saying that, but it's, by the time we're through, it's just like anytime you have a communication, one way or the other, with ICE, there needs to be a policy that the department, at least the department is aware of it. Whether it's the one that, whether it's something that the department says, hey, this guy has to go to the mayor or not, that's for them to decide. But I'm trying to think of this some poor guy, gal, whoever, in a department who does say, takes it on himself or herself to call ICE about something. Well, that's something that I'm sure the department would have an issue and a concern about, would like to know about. But I don't, but that's gonna have to be done within that department. I don't think that the mayor's policy may never get to that person.
Well, that's why we have training, right?
Well, but if that employee does go outside the limits of their daily duties to make that unusual report, is that department head even gonna know about it? Is that employee gonna say, hey, boss, by the way, I went
He's not
outside this
gonna know
door?
about it,
Yeah.
you're right, he's not gonna know about it, and that's what you're concerned about, but you wanna have a policy that says you shouldn't be doing that. That's clear, is all I'm saying.
I mean, we could have all the policies we like, at the
Or
end of.
not, I don't know.
Yeah, at the end of the day is what happens to those Metro employees if they are fined to be doing this stuff outside of what the department requires, what are the consequences?
And that's more of an internal HR thing than I need to call the mayor at 3 a.m. sort of thing for a staff management issue. Is that sort of what you
Yeah, I mean,
were saying?
I mean, this is where you get into these issues here, because that's something that would be of great concern, potentially, to individual departments.
Yeah.
One, how would you know about it? But 2, also, what would you do if that's happening?
I
Well,
agree.
when you find out, you want to make sure that the mayor's office know about it.
Yeah.
So eventually, you're going to find out that somebody in your department did do something.
Yeah,
At the
yeah.
point that you find out, it's when it becomes reportable to the mayor's office. I think that's
I would
it.
say 2 things. One is that, yes, I think departments need to each be encouraged, told, whatever, that they should have some internal policy regarding communications with ICE.
Yeah.
Second step to that is, I do think there is a public interest in knowing not what employee, I think there's an internal interest in knowing what employee and all the details, but I think there's a public interest in knowing an employee on 5 different occasions did this. And so the internal policy in place, and then some way to report that in broader strokes to the public. Because I mean, what I'm hoping, obviously, is then, departments will be able to say, look, we have this policy and there aren't communications to facilitate the rebuilding of trust. And I think, though, that transparency, I think the public interest in that transparency is the building of trust and communication.
I think it's also important for the mayor's office to have this information, and I think that they would wanna know what's going on in their departments that they're in charge of, and that way, if they're ever asked by someone in the media, they aren't blindsided.
It's feeling a little bit different to me than 2 guys in ICE uniform show up at a parks department. And so it might even be different, like you were saying, this one officer's done it like, I'm just gonna pick on parks because they're not here. One park staffer at the front desk has been asked like 5 different people for their immigration status. Like now somebody in the mayor's office needs to know about it, but maybe not the same exigency as ICE calls the police and says like, hey, we need you as backup, right now. So I don't know if that means, and that's gonna become important because again, with the timelines on the back of this. So do we not include it because Tori, you were saying this, this sort of, every department's gonna need its own policy, and that sort of, for them to, that's a staff management training issue, or do we include it either with bullet point 3 or in addition to, because there might be different timelines? So keep out, include as part of 3, give an example as part of 3 that captures that, or make it its own thing.
Once a department head found out about that parks employee, wouldn't that fall under number 3 already?
Maybe, and so maybe it's some sort of repeated rogue action.
But if it's a rogue action, the employee's taking a rogue action, he's not gonna self-report his rogue action, it's gonna be discovered. And then when it's discovered, it seemingly would fall under number 3
That's a good point. What,
and require the report.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
I think similar to people define emergency as differently, people define rogue as differently. So for example, I would say that hypothetically speaking, the probation officer or the probation department might not have seen something as a rogue action that other people may have. So I think that sometimes that having a policy of, a clear policy makes it clear to the employees too, if there is any communication, it has to be reported.
This is maybe off topic, but I wonder if these departments actually have anything written as policy, or is it just like office, what one person, culture, that's a good word. Because if there was a policy, then it could be in a manual that could be handed to the employee, but if it's just like you never were told by your training person, because I really doubt a lot of this stuff is actually written down.
You're totally right, and if you flip through these responses, you see it. I mean, if they have anything, it's often a practice. There are, with a few exceptions, but it's often a practice, not a policy.
Can we ask them to write a policy and have it filtered through Metro Legal for y'all to look at it?
A little more work, don't you?
I mean, but that's different from the reporting policy. It's an internal, like, don't ask people stuff you don't
This
need
is
to know
off
policy.
topic, I know, but I think it's important because a practice could be wrong and illegal, or totally fine, but we have no idea.
And it's really relevant for right now, because if this thing is about to be, you've got an employee who routinely, rejects their, disobeys department policy, then that begs the question, like, is there a department policy?
Right.
Are we allowed to just mandate internal policies at the Parks Department?
Well, I don't know if you can mandate them, but you can certainly propose that to the mayor, for the mayor to either require or urge.
Well, departments are required to write a letter every year talking about how they are saving paper. I don't know if this still happens. And when I was a Metro clerk, what I loved was when people would send me paper to tell me they were saving paper. So you can have you can require any
policies that you can.
I think that's the point, though, is that as we found out, there are very few departments that have a policy. They haven't really thought about it. One, they haven't probably had a lot of they haven't had requests, they haven't had a need to have one, and now we're talking about it. And whatever we decide to do, whatever comes out here, I think there needs to be the separate idea that the departments have to figure out what they want to do. I think after this, there needs to be something in addition to whatever the mayor puts out that is going to be department, specific, because they have their own internal way of doing things and so on and so forth. It just seems to me that that's the only way you're going to link those two. Seems to me.
And coupled with training, I'm so sorry. And coupled with training and specifics relative to the perceived request or the confusion in real time. Going back to your comment about the training, but also having the policies in place. So having something that articulates, and that's the reason why we're here, because there is just not a clear framework on how to react, behave, and how to identify what is just a rogue employee or a real emergency that requires mayoral attention and all of us to be at least informed so we can continue to inform or just educate on what really happened in real time without creating more confusion.
So there's two pieces. I think it's a great point, and I think we could probably address it when we said, we did the survey of 12 departments, got 11 responses. There are not uniform, most departments don't have anything. It is, our recommendation that the mayor recommend that there be internal policies, and then training related to those internal policies, right? So help me find the wording, internal policies about what?
Because at the end of the day, and we want to make sure that we honor the staff, the colleague that is at the front desk, the person that is having to deal with that issue in real time. And I don't want this to feel punitive when they haven't received training on how to really react.
Yeah.
And it is our role and responsibility to make sure that we equip them with the necessary tools to act or know who to call if I have two individuals asking for information and I'm manning really the desk.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that whatever we write elevates the colleagues and the staff and doesn't penalize them for not knowing for something that never were trained on.
Yeah, yeah. So how do we, if we're including it sort of in that section, that, in this, like you were saying, Tori, sort of an internal, like the departments are gonna have to write their own policies because they know best, what sorts of staff would need to do, your frontline staff, is it all staff, who's interfacing with the public? This task force will recommend that the mayor recommend to departments that they develop what?
I would say a policy to document, at a minimum, any communication or interaction with immigration agents. And then we could, potentially it moves beyond documentation to what the response is, but I think right now we're talking mostly about reporting, and so I think that's the first step. To document and collate or.
I feel like Mike said something a minute ago that's worth noting. I mean, if a department head had a rogue employee who self-initiated contact with ICE or immigration, the rogue employee is not going to be the one to volunteer that information, but as it comes out, whether it be public or, we investigate it in some way and it's discovered, it feels like that's a point where the department surely wants to notify. Assume it didn't go to the media. Let's assume that in this case, someone, it's a jail term, snitched them out, right? And said, hey, so-and-so, I understand, called ICE yesterday. Let's assume that bubbled up in any organization. The department head of that department, you would assume they better not discipline them if there's not a policy. That's
right.
not the employee's fault.
Yep.
Back to your point, if they're not trained to know the policy, you shouldn't discipline. Maybe we discipline the department head. That's a better angle. But at some point, that employee who self-initiated contact and shouldn't, if there was a policy, the department head should discipline that person and notify the mayor's office immediately.
Yep.
That feels very clear. It can't, whether it's public or not, when you're notified that one of your employees has done that, that covers, to me, it gets to where you are on number 3, because it came to you as a department head, you notified the mayor's office in that regard. To me, the other ones are more difficult, where the person walks up to the front desk in any organization maybe and initiates a question about who knows what it is. I've said this several times before, you're not always going to know that's ICE. And the way they operate, at least in the way I see it, it's not going to be obvious to the regular person, hardly people who know what's going on. So, maybe words like knowingly, right? I mean, we pressure our employees to give public records and public information. We have a whole division giving that information out. So I would be careful, just so we don't, I think it's important that we have policies and we train people on policy and that we hold people accountable. But maybe the reporting of it is when you, as a department head, are aware of that occurring, then you notify. A policy that you don't self-initiate contact with federal agencies. Self-initiate, right?
So 2 really important points there, I think. So the first one is, it sounds like we maybe have our third example for the third bullet, which is, the department head notifies the mayor's office when an employee has violated the internal policy governing communications with federal immigration authorities, or something like that. And then we get to Anna's point, which is departments should have that policy. And I think the important point that you just made there is, it's policy that documents any knowing communication with immigration officials.
I'm going to add that word because we're going to have some weirdness about, who asked for what, and it could turn out to be ICE. But unless the employee knew that, and let's say we didn't tell them what steps to cover to make sure they knew it was ICE, and it's on the department, not the individual, to correct that, I think.
But then we get into that point we talked earlier, that there are lots of information that's public, and it doesn't really matter who's asking
That's
for
right,
it.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's
on the
gotta be,
website.
it's gotta be turned over. And so, but again, that can all fall under this idea that the departments need to develop some type of all-encompassing response under this, in light of this committee's recommendations.
Yep. Okay, I think this is a really important point, and I thank you for raising it. Okay, so now I think we've got-ish our 3 categories with examples for each, and now comes the harder part, which is on the other side, thinking about the timelines. But I think, I say harder because I do think we've got to make sure that, are we assuming for the sake of this piece that reporting also means making public? And if we are assuming that, should we make that explicit? And if we're not assuming that, should we delineate like what should be made public and what shouldn't be? So, Mayor's Office folks, I don't know if you all have anything you want to say about that, or if I basically covered it. I mean, I guess.
I think it matters. I think that you bifurcated it properly.
So let's think about that. When are we talking about making public, and when are we talking about like calling Mary or the mayor or somebody? And so, and then maybe we can
In other
even,
words, it doesn't, in my view, I don't know that, subject to you all, there are things that it just doesn't matter to the public. Like, we need to know internally that there's weird stuff going on, but it doesn't cause public anxiety to figure that. In other words, there just seems to me there's 2 different baskets of information. One is just like management, like managing departments, and then the other is, what does the public need to know to keep them safe and confident that they're being appropriately protected?
yeah,
So, I think those are different baskets.
okay, I think that makes sense. Why don't we just take it one by one and maybe and know that what we're talking about for each one is we've got to figure out timeline for reporting and also a communications piece. So the first one is now communications with federal immigration authorities related to ongoing or established interactions-ish. This is the routine. The example that we had given was detainer warrants or requests to trial court probation officers for limited information. So what sort of, first question, communication to the mayor's office should be about that, and what, if any, communication to the public should we have about that?
You could have them file it with the clerk's office, just like the paper report.
File a paper report at the Metro Clerk's office.
That way it's public record, and if you really want it, it's there, you know? Just throwing that out
Yeah.
there.
Well, Sheriff Hall, what sort of, do you collect data on warrants? And what sort of data, and how easy is it to put that into a spreadsheet?
Yeah, that's really easy. It's done all the time on a regular basis. And we can provide that mayor, we can do, whatever. I would prefer we do it over a little period of time. What I'm saying is quarterly or monthly, either one.
Yeah.
But we can make that as a regular, and,
Yeah, as opposed to for each one.
right. Right.
Individual call to Mary Falls.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that's really helpful. So thinking for you, if you're already doing this on a monthly or quarterly basis, is it filing it with the clerk's office? Is it, what would be the right way, 1, to communicate to the mayor's office, 2, to communicate to the public, or is it just the same?
So let me ask, and I don't know, when we say public, I mean, I generally understand what we're talking about, but what do we want it to be available
You talk about press release?
for anyone, or do we want, I mean.
Just something on the website.
Yeah, I think it lives on a website or something, as opposed to,
Website. I mean,
Right.
you just have a spot that you, and quarterly or whatever.
I mean, could it be on the sheriff's own website to, or?
So here's the thing that's, just thinking through this, we have our website basically has, and don't hold me to it exactly, I think it's 48 hours before and after release. So that means anyone who's in jail, and then it stays live for 48 hours after you leave. So Mike Hager was in jail, we still have his name, the most likely one of us. So we still have record that he's on a website, that he was here in the last 48 hours. I mean, I'm not a techie, but we can figure out a way where, you know, on a monthly basis, the number of warrant detainers, without the people identified, but if someone wants to know who, we can get that. But I'm just saying, maybe what we do is that's a live breathing deal, and, you know, the number last month was 11, and the number this week is 2, or whatever you want to do. Something that we're already using for a purpose of that, where people can go get the information, versus, I don't want to create an ICE site, you know, for what we're talking about. So
Right.
I'm just saying that data is living, breathing, and we can just have it recorded, and the public can advertise that and notify whoever, and it's not really even produced, it's just available on a running basis.
Or do you mean like each department have it on their own site, or?
I think I'm the only one y'all are gonna care about. When it comes to this side, I'm talking about the routine where we have ongoing communication about the arrestee population. And I was just thinking, because it's used in a lot of different ways, going on to look. Or I can easily have monthly sent to the mayor's office and then make it public from up here. The part I'm a little worried about is, I would ask all of you to reach out if that data becomes confusing. Uh-oh, does that mean this? I mean, I have people with all sorts of, and we can at least explain what it means. And obviously, if it ticks in different directions, we want to know. But however you want to do it, it's not complicated. We already do it. I'm just trying to not reproduce
Yeah.
the work.
Yes.
And where would the public want to go find it? That's,
Yep. I assume the public's sort of learning about it from the advocacy groups more than like citizen just hops on the sheriff's office website, I imagine. So you're gonna be dealing, like I said, with more sophisticated digesters of that information then.
and we could send a monthly to the mayor's office and say, this month there were 11 detainer warrants, you know, and that basically means, so if that, and then that's maybe to the New Americas, I mean, and then if anyone wants it, we can go further anytime anyone wants to call and look into it, but trying to make it easy to find for the
Yeah.
people who most are interested, and then we can work our way back. And again, the website may not be, so you guys tell me, I mean, if it's sending a monthly report, and what I'm really talking about is this routine,
Yep, that first category.
I said we would like this warrant detainer
Yep.
applied, and we are working through that monthly. That number we can turn in.
What I'm trying to clarify, because I don't understand the legal stuff that goes with it, but I want to make sure that we don't have something out there that can be used against an individual because it's openly available. So that's my concern in terms of, what is that detainer warrant? Have they done something wrong or they did not? And if they haven't, can somebody else go look at it and then say, oh, you broke? How do we
Yeah.
protect the public as we're trying to provide information? That's my only
That's a really important concern.
concern there.
Yeah.
And my information would not be who it is.
Okay.
I mean, the number per month, and then you'd have to go really deep dive into who, and we wouldn't do that unless, so.
But it is available.
It is. And I think,
I understand.
the media
I
calls,
mean, I think it's fine just to put up a number, like
Right,
16
right,
or something,
right.
but technically, that information you're talking about, if somebody really wants it, could get it.
And it's a roadmap,
It is.
excuse me, Judge, it's a roadmap back, and going, like jumping ahead to some of these next categories on this topic, it's also, even though that poor employee sitting at the front desk, we may not want them to be exposed, and it's not their fault, that will be where other people will be under our control head back to and ask who that was.
Yeah, and then just to, in our first meeting, we discussed having a background information of each department, or at least yours. This is something that is important to review and refresh our memories as we look and discuss future steps. Remember, we talked about in the first part of the report, discussing some of our departments and what they do and how they handle the situations. And this conversation, specifically you were saying, Councilwoman, just is so important, right? To understand, review the legalese and what does it mean in real time, because we often think that we're protecting when instead we are doing the opposite. But if it's public records, right, then let's remind the public that at the end of the day, it's public records.
And I think what you're talking about there is the survey questions that we asked the departments and their answers. So I think what we learned is there just aren't that many answers
Yeah, but
right
in
now.
our end report, whatever we
Yeah.
deliver, then it's just a brief summary, right, of
Of
how
those
these
answers.
situations are handled in real time right now.
Yes, except for that most of the answer there is just a big question mark, right? Because we asked them, how do you handle these situations in real time? And what most of them said is it's never come up and/or we don't have a policy related to it. So, yeah, I mean, I actually think probably we should include these as part of the report, or maybe just a summary of them, but there's just not that. I hear what you're saying, like, we want to tell the public how the Parks Department, always picking on them, but like handles this, but they don't actually have a policy.
No, but the ones that are dealing with it.
Yes,
Yeah.
and there's
Yeah.
just a handful that have it, but even then, it's like practice, not policy. Okay, so getting back to the idea, it's sheriff's office, and then I think it's also the probation officers, right? So what, I'm hearing monthly report.
So, let's remember trial courts, I guess there are some, the majority of trial courts probation is state. But yes, there is some trial court metro probation.
I was gonna say, I would suggest asking for clarification on that state trial court's response as to whether they do have ongoing communications, or whether the response was being written as, in the past, we have had requests and this is how we've handled it. I'm not sure that it's an
I don't
ongoing.
think they have anything written down.
And
I don't
'cause
think
I actually asked for it, and
that
they were
it's
like, well, let me come tell you about it. That's why.
So you don't think it's ongoing?
I don't think
You
it's
have a
written
policy,
down. I think
yeah.
it's just something they say, like, it's just how it's happened. I don't want to speak for them, but I did not get the sense that something was written down.
Office culture.
I think there was at least something written down in
You
part
think
of it,
so?
because I
Okay.
reviewed it.
Okay.
A year, 2
Okay.
years ago.
Okay.
If you're gonna go to the state courts, I would go to the General Sessions Court also, since they had state that they have received requests from ICE.
Well, right, this is important because we gotta know whether we're including them in this reporting requirement, right? And we would only include them in the reporting requirement if they're sort of routinely receiving requests from ICE, right? Could we just, for the purposes of this, say, any office that does receive routine or ongoing communication, e.g. the sheriff's office, has to do this, and then it applies to the trial court and general sessions court if they fall into that category, right? But that maybe then changes whether we include them in our first example, if the trial court's actually not. Is that what you were saying, Sandy?
I just was saying, I would ask clarification
Yeah.
on whether there is
I think that's
ongoing
a good point.
routine.
The other thing is just, in terms of how much this is outward facing, there's gonna be a lot of confusion about what trial court probation means, because it is a very small slice. It is not the vast majority of probation that comes out of the trial court.
So maybe including that as an example is just like red herring.
I think, yes.
Okay, so let's take it off and we'll just have example one be
Yeah, 'cause we
detainer
don't even
warrants.
know what
And then I think that
kind of
eliminates any sin to do what you were saying. Okay, awesome, thank you for breaking that up.
Can I, if we go back to quick,
Yeah.
would it be possible, Darren, for detainer numbers, I know you guys have super easily accessible, would it also be possible to send numbers for anytime ICE has a phone call with, so anytime you guys put somebody on the phone with ICE in terms of an inmate? Because that is not necessarily directly correlated to detainer numbers.
Like interviews, that, okay.
So, I need to check and see. So what are you saying? Once the person's in and put on the phone with ICE to talk with ICE, is that person, does it matter if that person goes on to have the warrant detainer?
Well, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, but because they don't always, there are different numbers, so I think that's something else that would be interesting to have recorded. That's sort of the process of detainers, but is not reflected in just the number of detainers.
Yeah, let me look into that. See if I'm wrong.
But just for the detainer piece, thinking about this monthly
Yeah.
report, which would, I think just be huge, because I know you've got a real interest in sort of communicating what's going on to the public. Does that make sense? I'm looking at you two in particular, because you guys are probably the folks who are dealing mostly with directly affected folks in the community. Monthly updated website on DCSO, is that the right place, or file with the clerk, or where's the easiest place for your constituents, or really y'all who will probably be interpreting it for helping folks make sense of the data?
I would say if it is on DCSO website, but then I would love to also have a link to it from the mayor's website. So that if there is something that, like if different departments have places, that there is also something on the mayor's office that could help direct people there.
So,
Does that make sense?
right now, we think it's just the sheriff's office, but it might be somebody else, so in the event that it becomes another department, then the mayor's office, because they would sort of need to what's that word? Like combined, collect, make a compendium
Collate.
of that, all the different ones, but we think it's just the sheriff.
For routine, yes.
So maybe for routine, it's okay for the sheriff, but we're about to get to some
Right.
other mayor's office stuff. Okay, so for number one, for routine, we've got monthly updates on the DCSO website.
Let me ask you one thing about that, and just be aware of this. I mean, this information is equally interested to another group of people that aren't in the same place that some people
Yep.
are. And so my only thought here is, if you want me to submit you a report to the Office of New Americas, you know, that will get you right where you want to be. The data is on there, but for me to go, and I'm just talking about on the website, I was sitting there thinking, for what we're really trying to do, to see what the numbers are, explain what they are, and if there's conversation, maybe it's, maybe me sending it to wherever you want me to send it monthly, have my folks do a
Yep.
reporting system, because I'm not sure what we can do either way, but I think for the purpose you're shooting at, it feels like, let me submit a monthly report of all detainers for that particular month, and the numbers
Is that
will-
easiest for you, you think?
Well, it is, but I don't want to go through all the other mess of people misunderstanding what does that mean on the website. This group understands what we're trying to do.
Yep,
Why don't we get it in
yep.
the hands of people who will take it and at least ask the right questions? I start thinking the website might confuse more people who are on there for other purposes.
Mayor's office, does that make sense to you, a monthly report?
And if that doesn't work, we can change it. I mean,
Yep.
I start thinking, gosh, we're sitting there talking to people about
That's
what
a
we're
good
talking
point.
about, and we're having trouble figuring it out.
Absolutely.
So
Okay.
we need to
Love that.
kind of be.
Okay, so that's the routine stuff. Monthly report to the mayor's office, which I then assume mayor's office, this also gets at the communications piece, will be published on the Mayor's Office of New American website, yeah? So that's the first one. The second one is about modification to routine. So we said monthly for just routine stuff. So modification to it, what Bob and I had talked about yesterday is, man, if I'm the mayor's office and somebody's asking a department to modify a routine, the latest I possibly want to know about it is before they've taken action to modify, right? And so thinking about whether it's report to the mayor's office as soon as practicable, but in any case, before you make the decision. Does that feel right? Yeah.
Well, just, you also want to make sure that the mayor's office has time to react before the decision is made.
Before taking,
So
yes.
if I
yes.
tell you and then make the decision 5 minutes later, that doesn't do you much
How do
good.
we capture, I hear you.
Do we
How do
have-
we capture that?
Do we have to say but no longer than a certain amount of time either? 'Cause like we did in the third one?
We could, but maybe we capture it with, because the time might depend on, like, do you have a year to make this decision? or
Right.
Do you have 3 days?
Okay.
As soon as practicable, and in any case, like, with opportunity for the mayor's office to weigh in before taking any decisive action.
With
right?
sufficient time for the mayor's office.
With sufficient time, yep, okay. For mayor's office to
Assess and respond.
assess and respond before a department takes any decisive action. Okay, so what about the public-facing piece? Some of this might be an internal, right? There's like a fire burning at parks that can be extinguished by the mayor's office, right? This is an internal metro situation, and the mayor's office weighs in, and then there's actually no longer the fire, right? One could argue that this is really an internal metro management piece. You could also argue that the community has it's important for the community to know all the things that are happening, and this is one of the things that are happening. So what does the comms piece of this second bullet, what should it look like?
I like what Tori's been saying about involving the PIOs and somehow putting it in there, but I guess if a department doesn't have one,
This is also where the Office of New Americans is critical. I'm interested in how would it look like at the mayor's office internally, because from a public relations or communication with us and the communities are asking the questions, and how would it look like for us to collaborate to make sure that we're disseminating information appropriately if we're going to be dealing with the public?
So I think the question for this one is, are we dealing with the public? Is this an internal, with the third one, I think we're gonna probably get to, this is a public-facing emergency. with the second one, is this public or is this
I
internal?
might say with sufficient time to assess, I forget what was the.
Sufficient time for the mayor's office to assess and respond.
Assess and respond,
before the department.
including seeking appropriate community input.
Mhm. I like that, because it recognizes the fact that not every internal metro decision about modifications is gonna be the same.
Yeah.
You know what I really love about that is it was so fast, and I really want to get to model policies, and so, does that sound workable for 2? Okay, now let's get to 3, and again, the question is, how quickly do you have to report to the mayor's office, and what does the comms angle look like? And so, what we have here, what we had talked about is report to the mayor's office as soon as practical, but not longer than 3 business days. Again, the examples here were ICE asked for MNPD backup, ICE officers ask for info from a school or a parks department, or an employee violates, an internal policy repeatedly.
I don't think, and that third one isn't quite what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Because I think 2 things, is even if there is no internal policy saying you should or shouldn't communicate with ICE, I think people want to know. So I think right now, we're just talking about reporting, not a policy about communicating. And so I think there should be, I think that the first step is internal policies about any communication you as employee have with ICE should be reported, recorded, just so there's a paper trail of it, is the first step. And it's not about violating policies, it's about how much communication is happening.
So we were gonna have the mayor suggest, the task force suggests that the mayor suggests to the department that they have an internal policy where they are recording
Right.
communication with the agents, but that's about an internal sort of metro recording. You're talking about reporting the recording.
Yes.
Yes. Say that
With the
10 times.
recommendation to
Like, what am I
recommend
talking
to
about?
record the recording.
We're gonna need a task force to understand this.
And like, also with glossary and some other stuff.
But, yeah, and I want to focus this back again on reporting, not what the response is or is, so it's not about violating, it's about figuring out what's happening when, and making that transparent.
So do we, pardon the ignorance here, that third one about the employee repeatedly violating the internal policy?
I don't think it has
or we're not
anything to
using
do
that?
with-
I'm taking that out of the example for number 3.
Right.
I'm taking it out of the example for number 3.
I think the example
Because we
is,
covered that in our recommendation to recommend to have a thing
well, I think part of number 3 is just, that somebody has reported that they had these conversations with ICE.
what?
On number 3.
Number 3 is the example of ICE asking for police help or people showing up at parks.
Right, but we broadened it, right?
Communications with.
Communications with, yeah, up or down, communications. I'm there with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we're looking for is if the random employee decides to, let's say they're not violating policy necessarily, because we're not making policies about whether you can or can't communicate. We're making policies about making sure we know when people are communicating. So
Yes.
the policy needs to be, if there is any communication, that communication needs to be documented. And then it's about, how many times a police officer or a probation officer or a whatever has communicated with ICE.
Isn't that captured under the communications with?
Yes, but she's asked for examples. So that's what I'm saying. The example is not about violations. The example is what we need to know, because we are not at this stage yet. We're conflating policy about whether somebody can respond with reporting is what's going on.
I'm still stuck on the people in camo showing up at a parks department too, which I think is just so substantially different with
Right.
respect to how we should report it to the mayor's office and how that information should get shared.
That's what we were talking about back on the first page, about
Yeah.
whether the sort of more emergency issue or the communications should
Yeah.
be part of the same bullet or separate.
I almost want to make the argument that because it's going to show up differently with respect to the timeline under which it needs to be reported and the way it needs to be communicated, that maybe we actually do want to return to the 4, where we bucket out this other internal metro policy violation thereof, recording piece of it is maybe substantially different from this third bucket, yeah? Let's just try that for a second. Let's just say there's going to be a 4th one.
So what if we
But the third
leave
one-
3 as
yeah.
requests from federal immigration agencies and do 4 communications between Metro employees with, so just separate out requests from and communications with.
How is that substantively different?
The timelines, is that what y'all are saying?
Well,
Well, I can't answer that question, Mike, with respect to what Mary Catherine is saying, but Anna, yes, I think it's different, they're gonna have different timelines. But, so the thing that we're really trying to get at in 3 is like, this is the blowing up on Twitter, meet PIOs involved, exigent circumstances piece. And Mary Catherine, you're saying that's just requests from,
Oh, I mean, I think that's the reality of what those tend to be,
like,
but
what were you gonna say about that?
it seems like the timelines would be the same if they're that urgent.
There's the urgent request for, like, ICE shows up at Parks Department, but then there's the,
And then a department head finds out about this rogue employee. Is that not equally?
But remember, again, I'm not talking about somebody who's violating, we're not talking about an employee, kind of step back. In terms of policies within departments, right now, we are not at a spot of talking about what those policies can be in terms of controlling the communications. We're talking merely about policies to record those communications, so we know how often, in what situations those communications are happening. So the issue that we're talking about reporting here is, let's say, Parks, since they're not here, let's say Parks has a policy that anytime a Parks employee communicates with ICE, they have to fill out triplicate, people still do triplicate, and send it to their supervisor. And then, right, and then once a month, the supervisor, Parks looks and says, oh, okay, we had 4 reports of people who filled that out. So it's not about violating, it's about capturing the information. So it's not, there's not a routine practice, so they're rogue in the sense that there is not a routine practice, but they're not like committing malfeasance because they're not, so they're taking it upon themselves, but they're not operating against directives.
I think I understand what you're saying. I don't know how to put it in a policy wording, though.
Bob?
Well, I guess I'm still not quite sure what we're trying to.
I'm
The
real
statement
clear on
you're
the
trying to drive.
3rd, I'm really clear on the 3rd, Cindy has an idea.
I just think maybe, Mary Catherine, are we trying to clarify just on the timing piece? To the extent, again, going back to how to define something that's exigent or urgent and making that clear that that should be reported quickly. I think that's what she's focused on, more than like the definition. I think she wanted you to take out the example of the policy violation because, which we've done.
Yeah.
So now it's just about defining that as something
But
super urgent and it'll be.
Right, I mean, if 3 is including, so I see 2 separate somewhat categories, okay? And they are, the difference between them is more defined by how urgent we think the response needs to be, okay?
Yes.
And I actually think that anything in the emergency response isn't gonna come up from within anyway, it's gonna come through social media, so it probably isn't as important having this, but.
Can I ask, under your example of filling out these forms, single or triplicate, doesn't that then become routine and fall under number 1?
Well, no, I don't think it does. And
If you're going to mandate a policy that a department fill out a form every time an employee has a contact or communicates with, then you've created a routine.
That is a point. Didn't say good point. So I want to draw people's attentions on this, and obviously this is sort of obviously it's a very complex issue. The policy that I pointed to last time, the Austin policy, the Austin,
Which
Texas
you all should
policy.
have, I think.
It was sent around, I don't think it
Yes.
was
It was missing
reprinted.
pages.
It was only reprinted out on odd pages.
Oh, yeah,
But it was
do we
emailed
have
to
it?
Yeah. Is an example of, I mean, because what we are trying to get at is what communication is happening. And I want to encourage us again that I don't think we are at a place where we can make any decisions about what communications can or can't happen. We are merely at a place of figuring out what communications do happen. So I think it is possible, I would say that if there can be a policy saying anytime you have any communication with ICE, it needs to be documented, and that does not make it routine. But that's what I'm trying to get at.
And I like your knowing.
Yeah, any type of knowing,
Yeah.
yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
Well, what if we said that anything that falls in this third category should be reported immediately and in no event later than 24 hours, within 24 hours of occurrence?
Sure, I mean, I'm not even that, I
Or
think,
as soon as practical, period.
As soon as practical, but I think we have to put an outer time on it, because practical to you might mean a month, but the mayor's office needs to know 24 hours or 3 days, or, not practical to you specifically, Mike, I'm talking about the Parks Department.
Although, does that,
Who's not here?
Who's not here, again.
They want us to know the meeting.
They weren't even on this desk.
Well, me too.
Parks is right
I mean, as soon as practicable, is that fast enough for something that is breaking on social media?
What about a 3-day?
We have, right now we have, or we had talked about report to the mayor's office as soon as practicable, but not longer than 3 business days.
I mean, I think the reality, I think it was Mike who said this, that if it's breaking on social media, it's not gonna come up from within, it's gonna come from without.
But I think Juliana made a
But it will
point
still
last time
Speed
that,
things up if you
Yes.
have to.
and it's also important that, like, there's gonna be rumors coming on social media, but it's also important that the community hear from the department quickly
And they'll
about
have
what's
the
happened.
details.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which
Giving
Twitter
the
will
official
not.
information.
Yeah.
Twitter doesn't have detail.
Okay, so now we're back at, and it is 4:21, and by God, we're not running over, which means we're
No
not
Pier
gonna
Cities. I'm convinced there's no Pier Cities.
No, I'm not.
There are no Pier Cities.
Well, okay, so, no, because we've still gotta get to who in the mayor's office they're reporting to, but we're gonna do it so fast. So the category still is the third one, communication from federal immigration authorities related to interactions that do not qualify as ongoing or routine. And then that one is report to the mayor's office as soon as practicable, but not longer than 3 business days, yes-ish? The question then becomes, what does publication, that's reporting, it's not comms. So what does communications about that look like? What do we want it to look like? Is it concurrent? That probably doesn't make sense, because they need some time to decide how to respond. So what does that look like? And can we just build in what Bob said about including seeking appropriate community input or something?
That's on number 2, I think.
Yeah, I know, but can we use that?
I mean, should we do something more that, kind of in all cases, the mayor's office should seek transparency and to keep the community fully informed about actions that affect the public interest?
Public, fully informed about actions that affect the public interest.
I would say also, as we sort of distinguish in some ways between the emergency and the non-emergency, that could be a call the mayor's office makes. Between things that need an immediate mayor's office response to correct any misunderstandings or clarify, versus.
Yeah, so the mayor sort of, in that bucket 3, the mayor's office is sort of deciding.
Yeah.
We're gonna communicate, like, yeah, so it's basically, it's faster if you decide it's an emergency.
Right. And if it's something that's not an emergency, maybe again, the mayor's office has a once a month. We received this many reports of something.
Yeah. All right, let's just use that as a working assumption. Y'all have a chance
Sounds
to
good.
edit this in the draft report, but, okay, so then we get to whom in the mayor's office, like who's getting the 3 AM phone call, which would be kind of bucket 3. The monthly reports, I think we said it's the mayor's office of New Americans. But so Mary or somebody in the mayor's office, help us know for each of these buckets to whom departments should be communicating. And again, I think the first one we said it was Mona.
Or could we just say that the mayor's office shall designate someone?
Well,
Yeah,
we
I
can
like
designate, it will be
Yeah.
from her, from the Office of New Americans. And so then our thinking internally is when she gets something that merits further review, it then goes to legal, the chief operating officer, Kristen, since most of the departments affected would report to Kristen, and then to the communications team. And then as appropriate, the communications team can decide what do PIOs need to be notified and so on. But I think that's on a case-by-case basis, really what goes out.
So for the purposes of this, it sort of starts in the mayor's office of New Americans, and then internal processes, and the
Yeah.
mayor's office will determine,
Yeah.
who's due next and how
Could
that.
we ask what this American's office looks like? What is the structure? I mean, I know.
It looks like I just started as of last Thursday, so,
I was in charge of it, was one thing. So, has there been thought of, you know, what it means?
Why not let y'all speak to that? The question is, tell us more about the mayor's office of New Americans. It's been different under different mayors. What does it look like?
A lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. Welcome to the job.
As I mentioned earlier, I've joined the mayor's office as of last Thursday, primarily the role of New Americans liaison. So anything regarding, of course, the immigrants and refugees, and we can just run it through me and by me, and I'll be happy to help. But as of right now, I probably don't have answers to a lot of y'all's questions, but I'll be happy to jot them down, and I'll get back to you guys as soon as I can.
I'll ask this, what if there's an emergency case? Because from what you were describing, you guys go through Metro Legal and then up to the mayor. So is that the same case if it's an emergency? It'll still go through that process?
Through that channel, I believe so, yes.
And maybe I realize it is really very early to say what it's gonna look like, but maybe we could have 5 minutes at the fourth one to learn a little bit more about just sort of what the structure might be, or what, give you guys a little more time to figure out what that's gonna look like. Is that
The structure
of Mona or the position? Is that anything that will be figured out in 2 weeks now?
I mean, I think it's already figured out.
Oh, okay.
I think we'd love to.
Represent pretty much the New Americans office, and I'm here to help, and I'll be happy to answer any of y'all's questions and concerns. I'll share my information at the end of the meeting. As of right now, we don't have business cards, but electronically, just save some trees. Yeah.
Are you full-time at the mayor's office? Is that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And so you would be the primary contact?
I would be the go-to person, yes.
Okay. Great, welcome.
And Juliana, does that answer the questions that you guys have had about the Office of New Americans? Do we?
Partially, I'm with Mary Catherine. I would love to hear more, and I can't wait to connect in person to learn more about the role, the office.
Absolutely.
I'm a former graduate of my city academy, and I can tell you that the lessons that I learned through that program and the Office of New American ground and really shape the way that we communicate and in a direct liaison between Metro and the community. And I cannot emphasize how valuable your role will be in the community. So I look forward to meeting with you and learning more.
Yeah.
So we can also share with the community, because this is how we communicate directly.
Of course, I actually met with the Spanish Chamber and the Islamic Advisory Council, so they were all here, and we met and kind of shared information about each other. But I am looking forward to maybe personal a bit and just to get to know all of you guys. But as of right now, this is the structure, I guess, as of right now, yeah.
So maybe that's a conversation that you all have
later.
kind of outside, Okay, we now have 90 seconds left to review policies from peer cities, but I think that part of it can be accomplished because the one policy from peer cities that has come up is this Austin policy, which I am happy to summarize. And I think, as Mary Catherine was saying, it talks about reporting up and reporting down, communications to and communications from. And this is an on-point policy because it is essentially what we have just encapsulated in our 3 buckets. So I can use this one as a starting point to put in that draft report that y'all are going to review. There probably will be some other ones that I know Mary Catherine has some, and if other folks have them that are sort of relevant to our work, let's do it at the 3rd one. But there's a 4th one, 4th and final one. But for now, I'll include the Austin one as our review. And then you guys can just help me edit the report in the weeks to come. Okay, speaking of the weeks to come, our 4th and final meeting is Monday, December 9th. I think Audra already sent you the invite 4 o'clock, it's in a different location, it's in a different location, it's in a different location. Because we've invited the public to attend. I don't know how much public honestly will attend, but they're invited, and so we wanna make sure that we have room to accommodate them. So it's at Lindsley Hall, out at, Third and Lindsley, the Metro, there's decent parking. So from 4 to 5:30, that's when we'll be hearing from the public. I have one quick question for y'all about that. So let's say there are a bunch of members of the public who come. Is there a process under which we want, like, do we just give everybody 2 minutes to share their feedback? Does that feel right? Maybe 3 minutes, should it be 1 minute? Should we have them write on cards? Any strong feelings about what that process looks like?
I have a clarifying question. So are we going to get a copy, did you say then, of the draft proposal and review it before we get in?
Yes. Like, hopefully, within a week and a half, I'll have something to you. We'll edit it, maybe mostly over email, so that by the time we look at the draft that Monday, we've got to get to the mayor by that Friday. So hopefully then we're more doing copy edit stuff and including some pure policy stuff.
I think it's important. I know the council, we have people register beforehand.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good idea. That way, if there's multiple people from the same organization who want to speak, they could consolidate and figure out who's going to speak. And
so do we say 1 per organization? How does the council do that? 2 per organization?
What if we just say we follow the council rules? Would that be perfect?
Does that sound right?
We're not
Yeah.
establishing
Follow the
something.
council rules?
yes, we're at 3 minutes right now for how long people get to speak, but I think we were moving to maybe change it to 2 minutes. That way people get to their talking points right away. But if 3 minutes is something you guys want, then
Maybe
2 minutes?
the other question though is, how much time do we have? I mean, you're saying 5:30 to 45, I get that, but are we gonna say there's 30 minutes left to do this and end, or?
I think we're gonna
Council-
have, gosh, so excellent question. I think we're gonna need from 4 to 4:45 for our own purposes to, again, please over email, let's edit this report, but if there's any feedback there, and pure city stuff, but then we allow 45 minutes of public comment, so in part it could be number of people present to comment divided by 45 minutes, which maybe isn't the best way to do it. I will sit there until the last person has completed their 2 or 3, whatever we decide, minutes, but I don't know that I can hold you all to that.
Thank you for being the chair.
Yes, thank you, Sean.
I mean, I do think that, when we get there though, that's a worthy thing to figure out, because
Yeah.
if you're dividing up, there's 20 people, who cares, we can get that done, but, that's worth noting, because if you're gonna do the council rules, it sounds good to me, but if you got 5 people speaking,
Right.
then we might be able to let them go longer. That's
Yeah.
almost gonna be a hard gauge until you get in there,
Until we
but
get in there. I think that's right.
a window.
well, having them register beforehand would give us a.
Calculate, right.
How do they
There you go.
register beforehand for the council?
I don't know. I'm new, Fabian.
Yeah.
They use a website on the Metro Council where people can apply to speak.
I wonder if it should be more like how the MTA does it, they just fill out a card when they get there, because I don't know that people are
And then
gonna,
the person calls on that person.
right, fill out a card that's got their info,
And then you
we-
can filter questions if they're repeats and.
I don't know who the person is, but while we're doing the first 45 minutes, if the people were to have signed up and they were with the same organization, maybe you can narrow that down to 2. You could probably manage it better while we're doing this work, figuring out who the public is.
I think Audra's excited to help us with that.
I put buy note cards.
Yes, but, and then, so, Sandra, it's 3 minutes right now, and is it like 2 people from an org, or can it be 50 people from one organization?
It's been multiple people from the same side.
And that's okay, the council doesn't limit that. Why don't we just say we do council rules for now, and we do what's published as the council rules, which is 3 minutes, and then if there's 2 people there and they wanna speak for 5, that's fine, but if there's 50 people there, then we might have to further limit it. Okay, that sounds great, we're gonna get note cards. Okay, we did the best that we could. I will see you on Monday, December 9th at 4 o'clock in Lindsley Hall.
Great Thanksgiving, Patrick.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.